My name is Shannon Arcani, and today's live session we're going to be discussing Provincial Nominee Program for Ontario, also known as PNP. The three various different routes for Provincial Nominee in Ontario, but the two main ones I'll be discussing today is the employer when the job offer for worker stream, the employment job offer, international student stream, and then the employer job offer skills. And obviously, all of these three have in common is that the want to have job offer from a employer in Ontario, and people who are a foreign worker, qualifying as a job offer, or an international student qualifying as a job offer. Okay, so the employer job offer for worker students, they will talk about the requirements you need to have a full-time and permanent job offer from the employer. Full-time is 1,560 hours. And permanent is permanent. There's no end of contract or offer should mention that this is permanent ongoing. And full-time hours also 30 hours or 1,500 hours. There are eligible occupations such as professional, it's not paid to control. You cannot do this file, you cannot do it. If you have questions about what type of job you or the offer, send us a job offer, read it, that's all. We also have to
mention that it is urgent and it's necessary for the position. So the employer has to demonstrate it's urgent, the employment is necessary, and usually you do that by demonstrating that you have looked at other candidates, Canadian candidates. You could show that by demonstrating recruitment efforts. But the argument is that the position is urgent, it's necessary, I'm the employer, I'm located in the province of Ontario, and this position is in high demand for my company. As I mentioned, the work has to be based in Ontario. Some of the questions I get is, can I be self-employed or be shareholder into the company? We always recommend the answer to be no, but by the regulations, so long as you're 10% or less, you could still qualify for this application. But anything beyond 10% makes you ineligible. So if you have shares into the company, make sure it's less than 10%. It's obviously much better if you don't have any shares, if that's possible. If it's more than 10%, then you're not eligible. That includes you as the applicant, and then your spouse and the dependent children. So none of you can have more than 10% shares into the company. And dependent children is age of 22 or under. The most important requirement is that you have to demonstrate you have 2 years of cumulative paid full-time work experience in the last 5 years. So cumulative means you can have part-time positions, but it needs to be adding up to 2 years full-time and in the last 5 years. So that's the most important part of this. And if you want to calculate your hours, again, go back to what I said earlier, 30 hours a week, that includes full-time, and again, in the last 5 years. And usually I send my clients an Excel sheet, and then I calculate their hours to make sure that they're eligible under this criteria. We'll talk about what the employer requirements are in a moment, but I'll do that at the end just because it's similar or identical to the international student stream and the in-demand stream. So just put that on hold for now. Right now we're just talking about the applicant and not the employer. So as they are the same for these 3 routes, we're going to discuss it in one shot. The international student stream is exactly that. You are a student that have completed your studies in Canada and you've received a degree or a diploma that is at least 2 years in length. And that's very important because if it's 1 year in length, you're not eligible. Most diplomas, let's say for example, you go to Seneca College, Humber, etc., they are 2 years of length anyways, and if you do a bachelor's, it's usually 3 years plus. There are 1 year diplomas that are not eligible, and a degree or diploma or certification that you take that takes 1 year to complete can qualify if that is part of a degree. So there are diplomas where you do 1 year after your post-secondary education, so that could qualify. But if you're not sure if your 1 year post-secondary education qualifies, send us your transcript and we can evaluate that for you. But obviously 2 years plus that results in a degree or diploma, that does qualify. It has to be part of the list of Canadian institutions. So there is a list on CIC's website of the institutions that qualify. One way that you can kind of understand if you don't know the list is if it leads to a postgrad work permit, it qualifies, and if it doesn't, it could be considered a non-vocational college and they may not qualify. So again, feel free to call us and let us know what school you studied in Canada, and we can let you know if that particular institution qualifies for this program or not. Or you can, again, like I said, send the transcripts to us and we can look at that. The last one is the employer job offer in-demand skill stream. So in-demand means these particular occupations have been recognized that there's a lack of availability in the province of Ontario. So there's a nice list. Plus it is NOC C and D. So I won't read out the list to you because it's a lengthy one. But for example, NOC 3-4s, NOC 4-4, NOC 4412 is a home support worker. There's the NOC 7511, which is there's a lot of applications we do for that. That's the truck drivers. There is the 8432, the nursery and greenhouse workers. There's butchers. So there are NOC Cs and Ds that qualify. So again, I'll put this list on my website so you can take a look at it, or again, call us and we can see if your NOC C or D qualifies under the PNP Ontario stream. There are also some other NOCs that are specific, machine operators, for example, machine operators, chemical plant machine operators. I mean, very much in the NOC 9-4, which have a lot to do with heavy machine operations. Or in the food and beverage industry, that could also qualify, which is a NOC 9461. Again, there's about 20, I think, in total that are NOC C and D that do qualify, and it is a low-skilled position. But despite PNP Ontario being under the NOC A, B, and O, as I mentioned earlier, high-demand skill sets, they're NOC C and D. So again, I'll put the positions on our website, and I'll share that with you. If you are not sure what your NOC is, feel free to call me and we can assess it together. In this particular stream, you only need to demonstrate 9 months of employment and not 2 years like the other stream I mentioned. And that 9 month has to be obtained in the last 3 years, not 5, as per the other PNP route we just talked about. There is an IELTS test that you have to do, and you need to score a CLB level 4, which again, most clients don't have any difficulty passing, but it is a Canadian language benchmark of a level 4. And lastly, you need to demonstrate that you at least have a high school equivalency as part of your education. And by equivalency, I mean if you've done a degree or some certifications back home, we do what we call a WEST assessment. And if that WEST assessment comes back that you've successfully, the equivalency would have been a successful completion of a high school, then you would qualify. Okay, so the requirements are less than for the employer stream that we talked about earlier, but it's for specific NOCs. Now, as far as the employment or the employer requirements, they are the same for all three. And again, obviously it's PNP Ontario, so the employer has to physically be in Ontario. And it has to be at least in the company has to be operating for a minimum 3 years in the province of Ontario. You demonstrate this with a articles of incorporation or sole proprietorship, documentation, an HST number, things like this to demonstrate it's in good standing and operating in the province for 3 years. Also, the employer has a financial or a revenue requirement, and that's split between whether the employer is located inside the Greater Toronto Area or GTA or outside the Greater Toronto Area. And so GTA is City of Toronto, Durham, Halton, York, and Peel region, and then outside is anything outside those regions. So if you're inside the GTA, the gross revenue, annual revenue that you have to demonstrate, the employer has to demonstrate, is 1 million. And outside the GTA, the gross revenue that the officer will want to see is 500,000 or $500,000. So, and again, it's an annual revenue. It's not an annual revenue is in the last 12 months. Each company's revenue or annual revenue is on a different month. So you could have an August to August, you can have a February to February, whatever the employer's revenue stream or tax period is, that's what the officer will look at. In addition to that, during that annual review or company fiscal year, for inside the GTA, so again, that City of Toronto, Durham, Halton, and Peel region, the employer has to demonstrate that they have 5 full-time employees during that year, and those employees are permanent residents or Canadian citizens. So 5 full-time employees in the last fiscal year or during their annual review. And outside the GTA, 3 full-time employees who are Canadian citizens or permanent residents. Now, they don't have to be the exact same employees. So let's say you had 5 employees, you laid one off, but then hired someone else. So long as during that 12 months, you had 5 employees that are inside the GTA and then 3 outside the GTA. I do get a very frequent question, what if we have multiple locations and we have employees that work in different locations? And so that most likely will not qualify. We're looking at specifically in the province of Ontario and specifically for that company that the employee is coming, so the foreign applicant is applying for. In that company, that payroll has to show 5 or 3, whether that company is inside or outside GTA. So if you have multiple locations, you're not adding all of those employees. So that's the requirement from an employer standpoint for all of these 3 streams. But the applicant has, as I mentioned, different requirements. Okay, so now let me just see if there's any questions here. I see a lot of people saying hello, so hello. Good to see you guys here. I'll just kind of review my notes and see and give you guys a time to write to me and let me know if there's any questions you want me to address. So let me give you 30 seconds to a minute while I also just double check and make sure I didn't miss anything, which I don't think I did. Oh, I think that's it. I don't see anyone messaging. There's no questions, which is good. That means I've addressed it. One thing I don't really want to go in length is necessarily the process of it. PNP can be quite lengthy. Most of the times it can take about 1.5 to 2 years to process. If you qualify for express entry, it probably would be a better avenue to go because it could take anywhere between 6 to 8 months to process a PR through an express entry, but PNP could take 1.5 years and sometimes 2 years. However, most applicants that go through the PNP Ontario stream is because they lack the points for express entry, which is understandable. And when you have an employer to support your application, you can either apply straight through the PNP route, or you can get a nomination, get the 600 points, and then filter that through express entry, which means it's a 4-stage process, 2 stages for the PNP and then 2 stages for express entry. So it's both ways as possible. Now, let's assume you meet some of the requirements, but not all of the requirements for these 3 routes that we just discussed. There is an alternative way, which I don't always recommend, but you can make what's called an expression of interest. You can demonstrate to the officer that I meet majority of the requirements, but perhaps maybe your IELTS is low. It's not a CLB level 4, it's lower. In that sense, you can demonstrate your expression of interest to say that I'm interested in this province, and I think I'm going to be very employable and economically beneficial to Canada if I get my permanent residency in this province, and make those types of arguments. And then it is up to the officer to decide if they want to make an exception. That being said, I don't necessarily recommend it. Rarely do the officers make such exceptions, but it is an option that most clients ask about. I usually like to, at the bare minimum, ensure that my clients meet the bare minimum eligibility requirements and save the humanitarian and compassionate arguments for something different. But you might be reading about expression of interest and things like this, and that's what that is all about, and that's what they're talking about. So I still don't see any questions, so that's good. If you have any questions, you can give us a call. I put up the link on how you can book a consultation, or you can also email us at info@thevisa.ca. Thank you. Until next time.